A millionaire patient pretends to be in a coma, but when he hears his nurse's confession, everything changes. The room smelled like antiseptic and old money. Everything was white. White curtains, white bedsheets, white silence. In the center of it all lay a man who hadn't moved in 10 days. His name was Julian Blackwell, 33, heir to one of the oldest luxury hotel empires in the country. A man who once commanded boardrooms now lay still, a thin scar on his temple, the only mark of the crash that had nearly taken his life. Or so the world believed. What they didn't know was this: Julian Blackwell was not in a coma. He was pretending. Outside the thick glass door of his private hospital suite, muffled voices broke the quiet. "I'm telling you," came Damien's voice, Julian's cousin, slick-hamed, always overdressed, always smiling when he thought no one was watching. "This is our chance. The board's restless. If we don't step in now, we might lose everything." "Step in." The voice was colder, smoother. Catherine Blackwell, Julian's stepmother. "No, Damien, we don't step in. We take control. He's vulnerable. His assets are vulnerable. The board won't wait forever, and neither should we." Damien hesitated. "But the lawyer, Julian's estate attorney, still insists." "That attorney won't be a problem for long," Catherine interrupted. "He's loyal, yes, but isolated. We keep pushing the narrative. Julian may never wake up, and if we keep the nurse compliant, this'll be over within weeks." Inside the room, Julian's heart pounded beneath the surface of his motionless body. So it was true. He had suspected the crash wasn't an accident. A last-minute trip to the Hamptons had ended with a shredded guardrail, a flipped car, and a diagnosis of non-traumatic coma, but Julian had regained consciousness within 2 days and chosen not to speak. Not yet. He needed time. He needed to know who had betrayed him, and now, at least partly, he did. The door opened with a soft hiss. Footsteps. Slower this time. Different. Julian knew that rhythm already. Gentle, careful, measured. "Nora!" "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell." Her voice was soft but clear. No false sweetness. "It's just me." She moved around the bed with calm efficiency, checking his vitals, adjusting his blanket, brushing his hair back slightly with a practiced hand. There was no pity in her touch, only professionalism and something else. Something Julian couldn't name yet. He had watched her through the slit of barely opened eyes when she wasn't looking, the way she read aloud at night, the way she hummed to herself when she changed his IV. She treated him like a human being, not a lost cause. And she never said anything cruel. Not like Catherine. Not like Damien. "Your levels look stable today," Nora said quietly, scribbling something into the chart. "That's good." She sat beside him, sighing softly. "I don't know if you can hear me," she added, her voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "But I think you can. Just a feeling." Julian felt heat rise in his chest. Was she about to say something? He listened carefully, heart still. "I took this job because I needed the money. That's not a crime. I didn't ask too many questions because, well, life doesn't let me. But now that I'm here, I see things, I hear things, and they don't sit right." She glanced toward the door. "Your cousin came in yesterday when you were asleep, or, well, asleep. He told someone over the phone that you weren't waking up anytime soon, and the tone in his voice, it scared me," she swallowed. "I don't know what kind of family you have, Mr. Blackwell, but I think they want you gone." Julian's fingers twitched, just a fraction. Nora didn't notice. "I should say nothing," she whispered. "I should just take my paycheck and keep quiet. But I can't. I've lost too much already. I became a nurse to help people, and whether you're listening or not, I won't be part of something that lets someone fade away just because they're inconvenient." She stood slowly. "I'm going to start keeping 2 logs," she murmured. "One for them, and one that's honest." Julian felt something stir in his chest that hadn't moved in a long time. Here's to making. Nora adjusted the IV one last time, then placed a book on the table beside him. "Tonight, I'm going to read to you. Something real. Something human." She walked out without another word. The door clicked shut. And in the stillness, Julian Blackwell blinked once, slow, controlled. He would wait. but not for long. The nights were when the silence felt loudest. After the last round of checks and the cleaning staff left, Nora would dim the lights and sit by Julian's bedside. The only sounds, the soft beep of machines and the wind brushing the high windows of the private recovery wing. It had been 2 weeks since she took the assignment. 2 weeks of watching Julian Blackwell, once a name she had only seen in magazines and headlines, lie still like a statue carved from grief. But something was off, deeply off. She noticed it first with the medications. On her second week, she checked the chart and paused. The sedative dosage hadn't changed, despite no signs of agitation, seizures, or trauma. In fact, it hadn't been reviewed at all. Then came the nutrition logs. The physician's visits were increasingly rare. Vitals were logged but never evaluated. Even the speech therapist who was supposed to visit weekly hadn't shown up once, and yet there was no urgency from anyone. No concern, just polite nods and cold reminders to stick to protocol. She had worked in enough care facilities to know the quiet signs of negligence, but this felt like something else, something intentional. That evening she brought in her own copy of The Little Prince, a book her mother used to read when nights at home felt too dark. She flipped through the pages as she spoke to Julian. "You probably hate this book," she said softly, placing it on the table. "I mean, you're a businessman, practical, hotels, contracts, numbers. But I always liked this one. It's about someone who gets lost and then finds meaning in the simplest things." She reached for his wrist, checking his pulse again. Still steady, still strong. "You know," she added, glancing at the IV bag, "I asked Dr. Langston yesterday about your sedative dose. He brushed me off, said it was per family request, no adjustment, no taper plan, just status quo." Her voice turned sharp with frustration. "I became a nurse to help people get better, not stay stuck." She stood, walked to the window and pressed a hand to the glass. "I don't know who you really are, Julian, but I'm starting to believe you're more awake than anyone wants to admit." Her fingers curled into a fist. "I'm changing your protocol. Not everything, just a little. I know how to do it without raising alarms. And if anyone asks, I'll take the heat." She turned back to him. "But I can't sit by and watch you disappear like this. I've done that before, and I can't do it again." She reached for her notebook and began writing in a second log, one she kept hidden in her locker. A real record of meds, reflex responses, vitals, and her own observations. She didn't notice that Julian's eyes moved slightly beneath their lids. At midnight, she returned with a thermos of chamomile tea and a blanket draped over her shoulders. "I should go home," she whispered, "but I can't sleep anyway." She sat beside him again, pulled out the book and opened to the first chapter, and then, after a moment of stillness, she closed it. Instead, she spoke, not to fill the air, but to empty her heart. "I wasn't supposed to be your nurse, you know," she said. "I was filling in for someone else, emergency call. The original nurse backed out last minute. I didn't ask why." Her voice cracked. "I thought it was fate. Finally an assignment that paid enough to help me pay off school loans, get my license back. But now..." She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "I heard Catherine say something. In the hallway. She thought I was on break. She said, we just need to keep him sedated until things are finalized." Damien nodded like it was nothing. Nora paused. Her hands trembled. "I came here to help, but now I'm afraid I was hired to help someone die." She looked up at Julian, his face still and unmoved. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I had to say it out loud. I won't do it. I won't be part of something cruel." She stood slowly, voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what's going on. But I'm with you, whether or not you ever wake up." She touched his hand lightly. "You're not alone." And then she left, the door closing gently behind her. Inside the room, a single tear slipped from the corner of Julian's eye. He wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have to pretend for much longer. Nora said nothing to the doctors, nothing to the hospital director, nothing to the Blackwell family. But every night she spoke to Julian. She told him about her life in bits and pieces, stories from her early days as a nursing student, patients who had changed her, shifts that broke her, small kindnesses that kept her going. She talked about her father, a quiet plumber who believed that doing good didn't need an audience, it just needed consistency. Julian listened. He couldn't move much yet, couldn't speak, but he heard her. And it was more than the sound of her voice, it was the truth in it. In a world that had taught him to distrust everyone, Nora Ellis spoke like someone who hadn't yet given up on people. Every night, she arrived a little earlier, stayed a little longer. She started experimenting with small neurological stimulation tests, not anything that would raise red flags, just enough to see if his body could respond. A pinch of his palm, a light pressure on his eyelids, gentle sensory cues. One evening, as she was adjusting his blanket, she paused beside him, leaning closer. "Julian," she whispered, her voice uncertain. "If you can hear me, give me a sign. Anything." Silence. She sighed, shaking her head. "Maybe I'm just imagining things, wanting to believe in something that's not there." But then, his index finger moved. Just a twitch. Barely more than a whisper of motion. But it was real. Nora froze. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught. She leaned in closer. Did you just... There it was again. A slow, deliberate curl of his finger. Nora covered her mouth with both hands. "Oh my God!" She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over the stool behind her. For a few seconds, all she could do was stare at him, chest rising and falling fast, heart racing. Then she laughed, quiet and breathless, a stunned, joyful sound. "You can hear me?" she said, stepping back to his side. "Julian, you're in there. You've been listening this whole time, haven't you?" She blinked away tears, reaching for his hand. "Okay. Oh, we're going to do this slowly, all right? One finger for yes, nothing for no. Can you understand that?" A pause. Then another curl of his finger. Nora let out a shaky laugh. "This is insane. No one's going to believe this. But I do. I believe you." From that night on, everything changed. Their routine shifted. Now there was a new rhythm, a new language between them. One blink, one twitch, one squeeze. Yes, no, maybe. She brought flashcards, started using a basic alphabet chart. It was slow, sometimes frustrating, but Julian tried. He wanted to try. And Nora? She was patient, careful, and warm. She smiled every time he responded. She never rushed him. She never treated his limitations like burdens. The connection between them deepened. Julian learned her favorite songs, her favorite flavor of coffee, how she used to watch people come and go at the hotel her mom cleaned when she was little, imagining the kind of lives they lived. Nora, in turn, learned things about him he had never told anyone. Not with words, just with looks, reactions, questions she would ask, and the way he would twitch once for yes, stay still for no. "You never wanted this life, did you?" she asked one night, eyes scanning his chart while her fingers gently smoothed the edge of his sleeve, his finger curled. "Yes? You just wanted peace, not power." Another yes. She sat down beside him. "I think I get it. I never wanted to be a nurse just to pay the bills. I wanted to help, but somewhere along the way I started surviving instead of living." Julian moved his hand slightly, trying to reach hers. She took it without hesitation. "I won't let them do this to you," she said. "I don't care what they want. You're coming back. We're going to get you back." In that moment, for the first time in years, Julian Blackwell didn't feel like a name on a contract or a line in a will. He felt human. Because someone had chosen to believe in him, even when he couldn't speak. And now, with her help, he was ready to fight back. In the days that followed, a quiet current of urgency ran beneath every moment Nora and Julian shared. By day, Nora played the obedient nurse, logging routine notes, adjusting the IV with steady hands, nodding politely to Catherine's condescending remarks and Damien's fake concern. But at night, she and Julian became something else. Not just patient and nurse, but partners, co-conspirators, survivors. She had memorized his signals, One twitch for yes, a finger tap for no. A faint breath change when something scared him. They were getting good at this. One evening, as she massaged his left hand to stimulate muscle tone, she whispered, "I know you want to expose them, but we need proof, real proof, and we need to be careful." Julian managed a faint blink, his newest response, then twitched his finger once. Yes, Nora pulled a tiny device from her pocket, a sleek pin-sized camera she had borrowed from her friend in tech support. It wasn't hospital standard issue, but it was discreet, high resolution, and had saved more than one whistleblower in the past. "I'll place it in the medication cabinet," she said softly. "That's where Damien and Catherine always talk when they think no one's around. I've seen them whispering, giving instructions to the night staff. It's time someone else saw what they're doing." Julian's eyes flickered in agreement. That night, when she was certain no one was watching, Nora slipped into the medroom. With gloved hands and a steady heartbeat, she hid the camera inside the corner of a ceiling panel, just above the fridge where the controlled substances were stored. The motion sensor clicked to life. Now they waited. 2 nights later, the plan paid off. Nora returned to retrieve the camera early that morning before the cleaners arrived. She watched the footage in the break room, headphones in, laptop open, heart pounding. At first, just silence, then footsteps. Damien's voice, "She's getting too involved," he muttered. "That nurse, she's not stupid." "Let her ask questions," Catherine replied calmly. "As long as she doesn't start writing reports, we're fine. Besides, we'll be done soon. We give it 2 more weeks, then we file the DNR motion." Nora froze. "Julian has no living will," Damien said. "Won't that raise red flags?" "We'll claim a verbal directive. I've already spoken to the hospital board liaison. They're sympathetic. They want the mess gone." "And the lawyer?" "I'm working on it. He'll be cut out of the next meeting." Then came the words that chilled Nora's blood. "All that's left is to keep him sedated," Catherine said, "and I want that nurse out of here once the paperwork's ready. She's seen too much." Nora sat in silence, hands trembling, as the video finished. She saved the file 3 times, once to her USB, once to an encrypted cloud server, and once on her locked phone. Then, with Julian's help, she drafted a message to send it. "Who do we trust?" she asked that night, sitting by his bed with her laptop. Julian blinked once, then once again. Nora hesitated. 2 blinks? She opened her notebook, flipping to a list of names he had painstakingly helped her form letter by letter. At the top, Avery Blake, Julian's longtime personal attorney, loyal, discreet, locked out by the family after Julian's accident. "I'll send it to him," she said. "We'll know what to do." That night, she uploaded the video with a short message. "Mr. Blake, I believe you are the only person who ever truly stood by Julian Blackwell. He is alive, and what's happening here is a crime. This footage proves it. Please help us. Nora Ellis." She hit send. Then she held Julian's hand and whispered, "They won't win." He moved his fingers in hers, just slightly. It was enough. In the early hours of the morning, her phone buzzed. A message from Avery Blake. Subject, Re-U-R-G-E J. Blackwell, received. "I'm on my way. Do not speak to anyone else. Keep him safe. We're not alone in this anymore." Nora turned to Julian, still asleep, but no longer alone. The game had changed. Now it was time to fight back. Julian opened his eyes on a Tuesday morning. It was subtle at first, just a sliver of hazel between his lashes. Nora had been adjusting his oxygen monitor when she noticed the flutter. Her breath caught. "Julian?" His eyes blinked, once, then again, fully. He was awake. For the first time in weeks, his gaze found hers, and something inside her chest tightened. He wasn't just responding with fingers or breath now, he was looking at her. And it was like being seen for the first time. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "Hi," she whispered. "You're really back." He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, unused. She shook her head gently, placed a finger to her lips. "Don't rush. We'll take it slow. You're safe." She helped him sit up, propped by pillows. It was a delicate process, But they had prepared for this moment: muscle memory, reflex checks, incremental healing. What they hadn't prepared for was the quiet between them now. Not the silence of fear, but something sacred. Later that evening she came back after her shift, carrying a thermos of tea and a small notebook. "Thought we might talk," she said. "Real words this time." Julian smiled faintly. His voice was rough, broken, but he managed one syllable: tea. She laughed, passing him the cup. They talked in short bursts over the next hour, him mostly listening, nodding, resting. But his eyes never left hers. She told him about the emails with Avery Blake, how he was coming with a legal team, how everything was set in motion. "You'll have control of your estate again," she said. "And justice. You just have to hold on a little longer." Julian didn't answer immediately. Then, softly he rasped, "You held on for me." She nodded, suddenly unable to meet his gaze. A beat passed. The room dimmed around them. Julian's hand reached slowly for hers. "You saved me," he whispered. Nora exhaled sharply, emotion rushing forward like a tide. "I didn't know what I was doing at first," she confessed. "I just knew I couldn't be part of something cruel. But the more I sat here with you, the more I read, the more I talked, She looked down. "I started to care. About the man you are, not the money, not the name. Just you." Julian's eyes softened. "Nora," she shook her head, blinking fast. "I know it's not professional. I know I'm not supposed to say this. But I think I'm falling for you. And I hate that it's at the worst possible time." Her voice cracked. "You've been through hell. You don't need someone like me complicating things." Julian's grip on her hand tightened ever so slightly. "You're the only thing that's made any of this make sense." Nora's breath caught. He smiled, weak but real. "You didn't complicate anything. You brought me back." She wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan, laughing softly through the tears. "This is insane," she said. "I'm crying over my patient." "I'm not your patient," he whispered. "Not anymore." Silence fell between them again, but it was warm now, like a held breath between two people who knew something had changed. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and the city hummed beyond the hospital walls. Inside, Julian and Nora sat hand in hand, not yet lovers, not quite healed, but no longer afraid to feel. The war wasn't over, but they had each other now, and that was the start of something neither of them could name, but neither wanted to let go. The sun rose over the city like a silent promise. Inside Julian's penthouse suite at the private hospital, Nora helped him into a tailored gray suit, the first real clothes he had worn in weeks. He was still weak, moving slowly, but his eyes were sharper than they had ever been. "You're sure about this?" Nora asked as she buttoned the cuffs of his shirt. Julian nodded. "I won't hide anymore." Avery Blake arrived precisely at 9 a.m., with 2 assistants and a rolling briefcase full of sealed documents. "The press conference is set for 10. The hospital's boardroom is secure. Damien and Catherine will be there." Julian leaned back in his chair, fingers laced in front of him. "Then let's give them a show." The boardroom was full. Hospital executives, family members, a few well-dressed reporters who had been promised an exclusive on the fate of the Blackwell Empire. Catherine stood at the head of the room, a vision of composed confidence in a cream blazer. Damien just behind her, his smirk barely hidden. "Thank you all for coming," she began smoothly. "As you know, our family has faced an unspeakable hardship with Julian's tragic condition. Today, we'd like to discuss the transfer of temporary executive control." The double doors swung open. All eyes turned, and Julian Blackwell walked in, supported only slightly by a cane, dressed in the unmistakable dignity of someone who had faced death and won. Gasps filled the room. Cameras clicked. Damien turned white. Catherine froze. Julian didn't say a word until he reached the center of the room. Then he laid one hand flat on the table and looked directly at his stepmother. "I see you started without me." You're awake," Catherine stammered. "This is how..." Julian raised a hand. "Save it." He turned to the reporters. "I've been conscious for several weeks now. I was in a coma briefly, yes, but when I woke up I realized something was wrong, very wrong." Avery stepped forward, opened the briefcase and pulled out a small tablet. Julian nodded to Nora, who stood quietly at the back of the room, unnoticed until now. He met her eyes for a split second, enough to ground him. Then he pressed play, the room filled with the voices of Damien and Catherine. "We just need to keep him sedated. He won't be a problem much longer. We file the DNR once she's out of the picture." Gasps, murmurs. One executive stood, another sat down with a hand over his mouth. Damien tried to speak. That's taken out of context," Julian's voice cut through like a blade. "You tried to erase me, and you almost succeeded. If it hadn't been for one person—" He turned to Nora. "I wouldn't be here." Nora froze as the room turned toward her. Julian continued. "While everyone else was planning their next move, she stayed. She cared. She saved me." Catherine narrowed her eyes. "You fell for the nurse?" Julian looked at her coldly. "No, I chose her, just like she chose not to be complicit in your crime." The board members began murmuring among themselves. Avery took over, announcing pending charges, formal investigations, and the reinstatement of Julian's full authority. Catherine and Damien left the room in silence, their legacy crumbling behind them. Outside the boardroom, away from the chaos, Julian leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Nora rushed to his side. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," he corrected. She hesitated, looking around. Everyone saw. "Everyone knows now." He reached for her hand. "Good," he said quietly, "because I want the world to know who saved me, and who I want to be beside me from now on." She looked at him, eyes full. "Julian." But there were no more words needed, not now, because the truth was out, and they were finally free to live it. Nora didn't stay for the applause. She slipped away the moment the boardroom erupted in whispers and camera flashes, ducking through a side door and out into the cold afternoon air. Her hands shook as she pressed the elevator button, chest tight with something more complicated than fear. Julian had survived. He had won. And yet, why did she feel like she was the one running away? She packed her things quietly in the nurse's locker room that night, her thermos, the book she used to read aloud, and, most importantly, the little leather-bound notebook where she had kept every whispered observation, every question, every confession she had ever spoken when she thought Julian was asleep. She knew her time here was over. She couldn't stay, not when the entire world had watched him name her, not when headlines were already spinning her into a modern Florence Nightingale or a gold-digging scandal. She wasn't either. She was just tired and in love and unsure of what to do with both. She was locking the door when she heard the elevator ding behind her. "Nora?" She turned. Julian stood there. No cane this time. A little steadier on his feet. A winter coat over his suit. His eyes were tired but locked on hers. She inhaled sharply. "You shouldn't be walking around alone." "I'm not," he said. "I came to find you." She looked down. "I was just leaving." "I know." He stepped closer. "That's why I had to come now." He reached into his coat and pulled out the notebook. She froze. "You left this," he said. "You didn't think I'd let it go unread, did you?" Nora's cheeks flushed. "That wasn't meant for anyone," he finished gently. "I know." He opened it to a page near the middle. "I read this part 5 times, he said. "The night you said you were falling for me, and you hated it. Because you were scared. Because you thought I'd see you differently." He closed the notebook and looked up. "I don't." She stared at him. "I didn't fall for the nurse," he said. "I fell for the person who sat beside me when I was more ghost than man. The person who chose to believe I was worth saving, even when she thought no one would ever know." Her eyes brimmed. "Julian." He stepped forward, voice low and certain. "I've had a lifetime of people loving me for my name, my money, my power. You were the first one to love me without any of that." She shook her head. "I didn't mean t—" "I know," he interrupted, "but I did." Silence. Tender. Fragile. Then, softly, he asked, "Will you come back with me? Not to the hospital, not as a nurse, just as yourself." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "And if I say yes?" "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." Her lips trembled. "Okay," she whispered. Then Julian did something he hadn't done since before the crash. He smiled, and Nora stepped forward, into his arms, into the still-beating truth of what they had built, day by day, word by word, one heartbeat at a time, because some love stories don't begin with fireworks, some begin in silence, and grow louder when we finally choose to listen. 1 year later, the Blackwell name meant something different. The scandal had been national news for months. Julian had chosen to stay mostly quiet after the public revelation, letting the evidence and the law speak for itself. The video, the forged documents, and the witness testimony were enough. Catherine Blackwell, once the poised and pristine matriarch of the empire, now sat behind bars in a federal women's prison in upstate New York. The charges: conspiracy to commit attempted manslaughter, attempted medical fraud, obstruction of care. Damien, less careful, more arrogant, had been even easier to prosecute. His emails with private doctors, financial manipulation of Blackwell Hotel's shares, and his own recorded threats had sealed his fate. 15 years without parole. Their names were no longer whispered at black-tie galas or seen on luxury sponsorships. They were footnotes in a story that had turned toward healing. Julian had made sweeping changes. He stepped back from daily operations of the Blackwell Hotels and instead devoted himself to something new: the Nora Ellis Foundation, a nonprofit focused on protecting vulnerable patients from medical abuse and supporting whistleblowers in the healthcare system. Nora had resisted the name at first, embarrassed and shy, but Julian insisted. "You gave me back my life," he told her. "Now we help give others theirs." They opened their first pilot program in the very hospital where Julian had been kept. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. But the building felt different now, warmer, brighter. Not just because of the sunlight that streamed through the newly uncovered windows, but because of what they had built inside. The desert retreat was Nora's idea. It wasn't a spa or a resort, just a quiet house tucked into the canyons of New Mexico, far from the city, far from legacy, far from boardrooms and betrayal. They went there every few months. No cell phones, no press, just Nora, Julian, and peace. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and the sky burned gold, they hiked up a narrow trail behind the house. Nora laughed as Julian pretended to be out of breath. "You own hotels in 5 countries, she teased. "And you're winded after 15 minutes of walking?" "I almost died," he grinned. "Cut me some slack." At the top of the trail was a flat overlook that stretched for miles. Julian reached into his coat. Nora turned just as he knelt down, her breath catching. The ring was simple, a band of rose gold wrapped around a smooth stone of desert jasper, polished but not cut, warm and natural, like her. "I wanted to propose somewhere quiet," he said. "Somewhere like the place where I found myself again, where I found you." Tears welled in her eyes. He held the ring out. "Nora Ellis, you didn't just save me. You saved everything. My life, my name, my hope. Will you marry me? Not the millionaire, not the patient, but just me?" She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. "Yes," she whispered. "Always yes." They married in a garden behind the First Foundation Clinic. No press, no cameras, just family, chosen family, and the people they had helped. At the end of the ceremony, Nora looked out at the crowd and spotted something that made her heart stutter. A young girl in scrubs, holding hands with an older woman, smiling through tears. That girl had once emailed the foundation with a single sentence: "I'm scared to speak, but I think something's wrong in my hospital." Now she was applying to nursing school. because of Nora, because of Julian, because of love that hadn't come from perfection, but from persistence. That night, as they sat on a wooden bench, Julian held Nora's hand and looked out across the courtyard, where laughter echoed beneath lanterns strung from tree to tree. He leaned his head against hers. "Do you think they'll ever forget what happened?" She smiled. "Maybe." He turned to her. "Do you want them to?" "No," she said. "Not if it reminds them that good people still exist, that truth can win, that love can outlast betrayal." Julian kissed her forehead, and as the stars blinked awake overhead, they sat together, not as survivors, not as headlines, not as heirs or heroes, just as two people, finally whole, finally free, finally home. Sometimes healing begins in silence. Sometimes love begins with trust. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe in someone when the whole world has already walked away. Julian and Nora's story reminds us that no amount of power, wealth, or betrayal can outshine the quiet strength of compassion. That truth, no matter how deeply buried, can rise again, carried by those who dare to care. If this story moved your heart, inspired your soul, or reminded you of the power of forgiveness, please like this video, leave a comment, and most importantly, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more heartfelt, emotional journeys just like this one. Here, we tell stories that heal, stories that uplift, and stories that remind us what it truly means to be human. Thank you for watching. And remember, even in the quiet, love speaks.